Good evening. I hereby call this December the 14th meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. There are 2 items on tonight's general agenda. There are a number of items on the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda that are not pulled by council members are unanimously approved. The 2 items on the consent agenda we will be discussing. Item number 1, a report on police fire turnover and compensation, and an update on the Winston-Salem Police Department and violent crime. Before we get to our consent agenda and our general agenda, first of all, I want to recognize, we'll start with Police Chief Barry Roundtree, and secondly, Police Chief Trey Mayo. Welcome to all of the police officers and the firefighters and the citizens who came out to this meeting. We appreciate you being here today. It's my understanding that we need to recognize at least 2 groups of firefighters who have received an accommodation. At this particular time, I recognize Chief Mayo to have some comments. Chief Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I thought you had left us, and other members of the council and committee. We have actually 3 groups I'd like to recognize tonight, if I may. The first group is some recent promotions we have just made. So I'd like to now Division Chief Chris Langham and Division Chief Sandy Shepard, if they will come up and be recognized. We also have Division Chief Jeff Heitman. He's on vacation, was not able to join us tonight. So if you remember, the council approved us to reclassify 3 battalion chief positions as division chiefs in an effort to bring some consistency platoon-wide. And these are 2 of the gentlemen who do that. So these are now the highest ranking shift chiefs. They are working hard, and they are pulling things together and doing exactly like we had planned for them to do, managing projects and developing policies and programs and doing those sorts of things. Chief Langham has just been named as the next fire chief in Kernersville. So our congratulations to him on that. He'll be leaving us at the end of this month. So we didn't get much use out of him. We'll have to replace him pretty quickly. But congratulations to him. Thank you all. And also, we've promoted 4 new battalion chiefs, and they are Battalion Chief Sharice Moore, Darrell Sawyer, Bobby Wade, and Jay Walsh. And all of these individuals, division and battalion chiefs, they represented the Winston-Salem Fire Department remarkably well in the assessment process, which is recognized in the industry as the model upon which chief officers and company officers are selected. You may have seen the article in the Chronicle, was that last week or week before, on Chief Moore. She's the first African-American female battalion chief the department has ever had. And I've not researched it very much. She may be the first African-American battalion chief in the state of North Carolina. I won't bet my life on that, but if she's not, she's certainly in the top 3 or 4. There have not been very many. So congratulations to her on that. Thank you all. Congratulations. Next, I want to recognize the North Carolina Association of Rescue and Emergency Medical Services. They have an annual conference, and back in August it was in Hickory. And as part of that conference, they have some rescue competitions. The Winston-Salem Fire Department had never participated. I got the request from the association for teams who wanted to participate. Our training chief, Tad Byram, he sent the call out department wide, and we had 6 people volunteer their time and some of their resources to go to Hickory and participate in that challenge. So they are Captain Marcus Braun, Engineer Justin Grubbs, firefighters Chris Kiesler, Travis Franklin, James Brinkley, and Mark Podlasky. I don't know which shoulder I need to be looking over. So, if you were into boxing or wrestling, the main event of this association, their annual meeting, is the 6-person technical rescue competition. And this year, that scenario, which you find out about 5 minutes before go time, right? So the scenario this year was 2 victims in a 250-foot length of 36-inch black corrugated plastic pipe. And it's dark in there, let me tell you. I've been in that pipe before, and I don't care what kind of flashlight you take in there, you can't see anything until you shine it on something in that pipe. So the first victim was about 100 feet in. The second victim was all the way at the end of the pipe, 250 feet in, had 1,500 pounds of concrete. It's a mannequin. 1,500 pounds of concrete on his legs. There were 12 teams in the competition. They had 20 minutes to formulate their plan and effect a rescue. And this team was the only team that was able to do it within the 20-minute time frame. They did it in 12 minutes, 34 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah.
This was the first time. So these competitions have been traditionally won by rescue squads. This is the first time a fire department had ever won. So our hats off to these folks. Quite a remarkable feat. They also won. So that was the 6-person challenge. There was also, they have a 2-person rescue challenge, and these guys claimed 3rd, 4th, and 5th place out of 12 teams in the 2-person challenge. And then finally, before leaving Hickory, they collected a Chad M. Smith Memorial Spirit Award, and that award goes to the team displaying the most teamwork, effort, and sportsmanship. So truly a job well done by these gentlemen right here. And now, the old guys. Captains Ricky Brown, Dwayne Cheek, John Pennington, and then Bill Petrantonio. Now, he's not from around here. Bill is a retired captain from Everett, Massachusetts, who participates as part of the Winston-Salem Fire Department's Firefighter Combat Challenge team. And they have just come back from the World Games in Montgomery. That was in October. And just just a few of the things that this team either currently, the records they currently hold or that they have held in the past. They have competed 21 consecutive years, which is the longest continuous participation of any fire department that runs in the competition. Now, the Firefighter Combat Challenge is also known as the toughest 2 minutes in sports. They've earned more medals than any other agency that has ever competed in the Firefighter Combat Challenge. They are 7-time world champions. Twice they have collected the individual, the over 45, that's why I call them old guys, and it gets worse, the over 45 individual national champion. Twice they've collected the over 50 individual national championship. They'll have to correct me on this. They either are or have been the over 40 relay world record holders. They have been the 2-time over 50 relay world record holders, the over 55 relay world record holders, the over 50 tandem world record holders, the over 65 individual world record holders, and they have won over 100 regional events. So, they have done an outstanding job of marketing the city of Winston-Salem and the Winston-Salem Fire Department, and they do this on a voluntary basis. They volunteer their time for a lot of those 21 years. They have volunteered not only their time, but they have spent a lot of personal resources in purchasing gear and travel, room and board, entry fees, and all those sorts of things. And they have one of their most recent plaques. Captain Cheek, you want to tell us what that is?
Yeah, unfortunately this year we only finished 3rd in the over 40 relay, whereas last year we actually won the world championship in that division. One thing I would like to point out is the only difference between our over 40 relay and our over 50 relay, 3 of us were in the over 40 and the over 50. We do have 2 individuals from, one from Greensboro and from Charlotte Fire Department that run with us on our over 40 team. So We're also the oldest over 40 relay team. And last year we finished fourth in the over 50 division, but finished first in the over 40 division with the same three team members.
All right.
Those guys from Charlotte and Greensboro are probably holding these guys back. Thank you all. Congratulations for everything you've accomplished. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. And I do want to say, I know some of the members of the council want to have some words. Truly, I sleep well at night knowing that the men and women of our fire department are protecting us. We appreciate all of the awards and accolades. You truly bring honor to our city, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Thank you. I, too, would like to agree with the chairman. We appreciate you very much. You have noticed when I know people a little better than some people, I always let them tell you how I know them. All right, Chief Kernersville, Fire Chief, come up and tell them how we know each other. I have to be fair across the board when I have worked with people's children.
Chief Lane is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you. This is not the first time I've been here to explain how me and Councilmember Burke know each other. Years ago, going through Winston-Salem South County school system, I was selected from a group of students to be able to go to the city and participate in follow a city employee type day. Councilmember Burke was head of that. We got to write a paper about it, and she was pretty much our contact throughout the whole program and find out and landed here.
Worked out pretty well for you, right?
Sir?
It worked out pretty well for you.
Yes, sir, it did. It worked out pretty well. That's what started the ball rolling, I guess you would say. So we've known each other a long time. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Councilmember Bessie.
Of course, it goes without saying that I add my congratulations to everyone who's been recognized for well-deserved promotions or for awards. But I just want to say about the folks, that latest group that was recognized, gentlemen, I race marathons, but I got tired listening to your titles being read.
If there's nothing further, again, thanks to our fire department and to our police department, we will move to the consent agenda. Members of the committee, members of the council, we have one item to be pulled from the consent agenda, item C4. We have a minor change that we will adjust in 1 second. But other than item C4, are there any particular items we need to pull for consideration? If there are none, I would approve a motion, entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposers likewise. That is unanimous. Item C4.
Ordinance to deny renewal of the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity of one taxi cab service in the city of Winston-Salem for safe ride transportation.
Giving us a brief update on where we are with item C4 is our Assistant City Attorney, Mr. Greg Turner. City Manager. I don't know if it's a promotion or a lateral move, but
I was trying to decide whether to object to that. Mr. Chairman, this item was recommended for rejection based upon the fact that there was past due money due to the city that has been resolved by the certificate holder today, and so staff is recommending approval of the certificate. There's a revised item at your places.
Are there any questions for Mr. Turner at this particular time?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposers likewise. That is unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thank you.
We'll move to item 1 of the general agenda at this time. Madam Secretary.
Item G1, report on police and fire turnover and compensation.
Giving us a report on this item is our Head of Human Resources, Ms. Carmen Carruth. Ms. Carruth, you are recognized.
The purpose of the study that we did is really twofold. It is to both assess hiring competitiveness of police and fire salaries, meaning that we were looking at how our entry-level police and fire positions actually compare with those other jurisdictions that we compete with for that personnel. And two, to assess the market competitiveness of these salaries. How do our salaries compare with others with those in other jurisdictions. There were two groups of data that we looked at. One is the Triad, Greensboro, High Point, Kernersville, Forsyth County, and Guilford County. And then we looked also at data on other North Carolina cities with 100,000 plus populations, which is where we fall. Okay, the first thing we looked at is entry-level salaries. That is, when someone is entering either the fire service or the police service, they come in as a police officer or firefighter. How do those entry-level salaries compare with the average for the Triad cities? We did not include any incentives in this data. So there are jurisdictions give incentives for education, military service, experience. None of that is included to make it an apples-to-apples comparison. What we found is that when we compare with the average for our Triad cities, we're significantly below for police officer trainees and firefighter trainees at 10%. And when they're done with recruit school and they become both police officers and firefighters, we're still below 6 and 9%. 6 for police officers and 9 for firefighters, as compared with the other Triad cities in our survey. Okay, this slide has I know it has a lot of information, but I wanted to show you that we start about 10% below when we hire in these positions. This looks at police officer and firefighter. Start about 10% below. I wanted to see where they are in 5 years. Each jurisdiction has a different way of moving salaries. Some of them have step pay plans where employees come in and they receive increases on a regular basis, 6 months, 12, and so forth. That's the city of Greensboro has that. Others have career ladders where they're non-competitive salary increases when employees actually complete training, certifications, they automatically get additional salary. Forsyth County has a different mechanism. They try to move employees to their mid-range, to their market rate as soon as possible. So they give an extra, what they call a pay accelerator. So an extra little bump during the years. When they have the merit increase, they give just merit and an extra bump if they're below. And the town of Kernersville does a very similar thing. They try to get people to market rate within 5 years, and so they have extra that they give. In looking at this, I assumed that in addition to all the other mechanisms for moving pay, that employees would get a 2% merit annually. So at the end of 5 years, with no other incentives, we would actually be pretty significantly behind. We're 15% behind the average for the other jurisdictions, both in police officer and firefighter pay. I also looked at the percentage change from when they start to the end of the 5 years, and as you can see, our officers and firefighters their salaries only grow about 16% compared with officers and firefighters in the other jurisdictions who grow in the 20% range. This slide just shows turnover. Turnover in police and fire jobs over the last 3 years. We've had 71 sworn police employees turnover and 34 within the past 3 years. That's turnover rate of 12% for police and 10% for fire. When you look at why, I looked at really 3 areas. The first is really related to the job itself and pay. And that's where the vast majority report, or the reason that the vast majority report that they're leaving. The second category is really about the things that are the personal things, whether they're their family reasons, just needing to relocate, just anything that's personal that they actually reported. We put in that category. And then there were a few other things just that we threw at the bottom. Military, health reasons, military, leaving to go to the military, just very miscellaneous things. But if you look at the data, it shows you clearly that they're leaving for either other jobs or pay.
Mrs. Cruz, before we move to the next slide, members of the council, members of the committee, if there are any questions, we can just go ahead and jump right in and ask them as we move throughout the simultaneous slides. Councilman Radler.
Yes, Chairman Taylor, did I miss something, Ms. Carruth? You skipped 6.
Did I skip 6?
You skipped to page 6, and I think that's
I'm
some very
sorry.
important
Yeah, it is.
information that we need to say.
I'm sorry. I'm technologically challenged. Okay, 6. 6 is different from the other slides in that the first 2 slides we looked at just starting pay and then how that grows. This looks at actual pay, which includes all the things that that we didn't include. Not all. We took out the kind of things to equalize it. This includes everything. It reflects tenure. It reflects merit increases. It reflects education incentives. It reflects military incentives. All of the incentives are included in actual pay. As you can see, for police officer and firefighter and trainee and police officer trainee, we are in actual salaries. We're still behind the triad average. And when you look at the state and the cities that we compare with, over 100,000, we're even farther behind. One of the things I failed to mention on the slide before, the 5-year comparison, is one of the reasons I looked at that is that if we lose people, we tend to lose them within the first 5 years. So, and I think that slide tells you a lot about why, because it's just hard for us to compete to keep them, even in the triad. Okay, so.
Mrs. Carruth, please forgive me. Councilman Berlight.
Yeah, Carmen, if we train firefighters or police officers, they are required to stay how long?
If they leave before 5 years,
5 years.
they have to pay us back.
Okay.
That's correct.
getting
Is it
my-
5? It's 5. 3. I'm sorry. 3.
Okay.
They have to pay us
All right,
back.
thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Carruth?
Yeah.
Councilman Montgomery.
It was on the salary portions that were shown in the beginning in terms of the averages, and you may be able to provide it to us another time, but it'd be good to see the far ends of those averages in terms of the higher end and the lower end in terms of what was brought in to show us that average piece there in the very beginning, because you said to go ahead and ask those questions that we had as we're going. We get kind of to see some of those cities, the higher end that brought that average in terms of the higher salaries,
Okay.
and then the lower ones on there, just to see how those the range.
Okay.
Councilman Bradley.
Yes, and some other information that I would like to have also is we're looking at this data. There's a history to how we got here, and I'd like to see an estimated time or timeline of when Winston-Salem or our jurisdiction began to fall drastically behind with the years or whatever was going on. And I'd also like to know, and maybe you can answer this, I don't know, did we ever or do we ever, now we're doing it, but did we ever really monitor or benchmark the other jurisdictions as to these salaries of public safety, so that maybe we would have seen it coming, that the disparity that we were now falling way behind as each year was going forward?
I think In the past, we have looked at that, and over the years, when I was here, even when I was here before, we made some adjustments. I think the real issue is that a lot of jurisdictions, and I think you saw it on one of those slides, actually has mechanisms for moving their salaries even when there's no market increase, because they have steps and that sort of thing. And we only move our salaries when we have, I'm sorry, merit increases. Did I say market? They move even when they don't have merit increases. And we only move with merit increases. So we don't have built-in mechanisms for actually moving, moving salaries. So if we have a year when we're not able to give a merit increase, then our salaries stay stagnant. Whereas in some other jurisdictions, they're still able to move.
And Ms. Carmen, I don't know whether it's possible or not, could you get us the policy of those jurisdictions that you showed us, so we could see what they're using or doing to have made that happen for them?
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Are we in fact losing people after year 3? Is that the typical?
I think we're losing people I think we lose people all along, but I think the vast majority are between 1 and 5.
Okay. And I notice we're benchmarking ourselves against the Triad, and I know we lose teachers to Houston, Texas, and other places. Is that the best comparison for us to use? Is that where most of our people go? They stay in state or they stay in the Triad?
They do both. Some of them go out of state. I can get you some information on that. I do know we do lose to some Triad jurisdictions, particularly Kernersville.
Right. I think it would be important to benchmark to where we're losing people to. So.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Carew. Next slide, please.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to present some options for addressing these issues for your consideration. There are 2 sets of options. The first is to address hiring competitiveness. And one of the things that we could do to do that would be to adjust our starting pay by 7.5% or some percentage. A 7.5 is close. I mean, we're 10% behind on starting pay. If we do that, the salaries of employees who are below that minimum, we'd essentially adjust the minimums on our pay plan. The salaries for employees that are below would be adjusted up to that new minimum. If we were to do that, starting salaries would then be within 3% of the average for Triad cities rather than 10%. 30% of our employees would actually receive the adjustment, and however, it would create some salary compression because we would be raising salaries at the lower end, which means that they would bump up against other salaries for employees that are at the lower end. So there would be some compression there. For addressing market competitiveness, we could implement an annual supplemental pay adjustment, which is just would be some additional percentage increase for 5 years. We've costed out some options. We looked at 1%, 1.5%, 2%, and 3%. And if we did that for 5 years, then we could evaluate our market competitiveness at the end of the 5 years and see where we go from there. This slide shows you the information I showed you at the very beginning, where we are in starting salaries, where we would be if we adjusted them 7.5%, and how that would compare with the average for the Triad cities, which is we would be within 3% on starting salaries for police officer and firefighter. This goes back to the chart we looked at earlier, the 5-year chart. If we adjusted 7.5%, our hiring salaries by the 7.5%, and then I used as an example 1.5% supplemental pay and gave a 2% merit annually, that would get us, it would get us from a 16% change in pay over that 5 years to a 25% change in pay for both police and fire. Okay, there would be, I've looked at two options for actually implementing those changes. The first would be to implement starting this fiscal year and to do the supplemental pay in January. That supplemental pay would, we would recommend that it would be, if we do that, that it would be given to folks that have at least 1 year of tenure, and and you can see the cost of that for all of the percentage scenarios we looked at. We could then come in at the beginning of next fiscal year and adjust our minimums at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then do another supplemental pay adjustment in January. The cost for this fiscal year ranges from $300,000 to $900,000, depending on the percentage, and from 1.2 to 2.2 million for next year, depending on the percentage. The second option would be just to start next fiscal year by actually implementing both the supplemental pay and the minimum adjustment at the beginning of the fiscal year. And the cost would be close to the same for next fiscal year, as we saw on the other slide. And that's the presentation. If there are other questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Before we get to the remaining questions, council members, members of the committee, we do have some critical information to consider. We've known that this has been an issue for some time, and the question is probably going through people's minds, what have we been doing since we found out that this was an issue? I can say that this council has been committed to addressing the concerns that we've heard tonight, and I want to talk a little bit about that before we move to the remaining questions. Since 2013, 2014, we have authorized of 1.5 to 3% merit pay, depending on performance rating, as you well know, Mrs. Caruth. 2014, 2015, there has been a 1.5% market adjustment for employees who are below the market, and then there was a 1.5 to 3% merit pay, depending on performance, depending on the performance rating. In 2015 and 16, there was a 1% market adjustment for all employees, including police and fire, and our frontline sanitation workers. And there was also a 1.5 to 3% merit pay adjustment, depending on performance and rating. Now, that has not been enough, and we recognize that. And I think the fact that we're having that conversation says that we want to move forward with attracting and retaining the brightest and best police and fire. And I think this council will continue to do a good job. We know it's an issue, we have been addressing it, and we will continue to do a better job. So with that being said, are there any particular questions that we have for Ms. Caruth or any of our staff at this particular time? Councilmember Light, then we'll go to Councilmember Adams.
Okay, do your charts here take into consideration that compression that you were talking about? This would be across the board, in other words, to
Yes.
low to medium to highest
Yes.
paid. Okay. Now explain to me, I've been confused about this all along. This, what you're suggesting here, is not the same thing as the step system or some of these other systems that the organizations use?
No, ma'am.
No. How is this better, worse, whatever? Does it just catch us up faster? Is that?
It's not better or worse. It's just not the same. When with career ladders, you actually design requirements to move. So with a career ladder, you'd say someone comes in, and in order to move to the next level, they have to achieve these 10 things, which is different. This is just kind of an across-the-board increase. With a step plan, it's similar, but you know that you're moving 2%, and then you're going to move 2% more. So step plan is sort of similar, but it's more what's the word? It's It's actually set forth. I mean, you have a schedule that shows you exactly what your pay is going to be. Everyone moves on that plan from this point to this one to this one and so forth within a specified period of time.
Okay, but then how does a merit increase play into this? If it's, I mean, you know, if someone gets a 2% merit increase and someone gets a 0.5%.
It depends. In Greensboro, the way they do it is you're guaranteed the step. And if their council approves a larger merit than the step, then they only get the step. If the council approves a smaller percentage merit, they still get the step. Does that make sense?
No.
For instance, if the step is 2.5% to get from step 1 to step 2, and the council approves 3%, then they only get the 2.5%. If the council approves a 1% merit, they still get the 2.5%.
I see.
So they get
Okay.
they get the step regardless of what the merit is.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember McIntosh.
We've got in black and white what it costs us to begin to make up the disparity. Do we know what it costs us to not do that? What our cost of rehiring and retraining? I mean,
We can figure that for you.
because that's a real cost, not only in the dollars, but in the lack of continuity, the lack of seasoning. So this is a much easier thing to put a number to, but I would just want to emphasize that is a real cost. We're spending that money anyway every year.
Mm-hmm.
So I applaud this method of correcting that. If we're going to spend the money, I'd much rather pay our people better than to have to go out and hire new folks. City manager and I have talked about this, and I know it's very difficult to do. I'd love to see long-term some way of subsidizing housing for our firefighters and our policemen to both reinforce our neighborhoods and to also make them homeowners, and both of which I think are very important long-term goals for our citizens of Winston-Salem. I know it's very complex. I know there are some things in the state legislature that prevent us from doing that, but I'd like to look into that down the road. Thank you.
Councilmember Adams.
Thank you. Ms. Caruth or the city manager, more information needed. Provide some information that would show, I know you've given us this time frame, but at least give us an option to see what happens if we cut that time in half to get there. To get where you're already telling us to get in 5 years, what would happen if we reduce that time to 2.5 years? And Mr. Garrity, I'd like to see what kinds of, what would the tax implications possibly be? I mean, we all in this room need to be, as they say, like grown folk and understand that there's going to be that if this happens. So show us what those implications could be, whether it's a 1%, a penny, 2 pennies, a penny and a half, or what. We need to be able to look at that as well. Because again, our citizens need to understand that times have changed. We didn't keep up with the change, and now we're fighting to keep the best of the best that we've trained and tax dollars have paid for within our city. And our fire and police, they love us, they family, but they're having to make those decisions based on their families and what they need. So in order, just like any corporation, for us to be successful, we're going to have to do what we have to do to try to retain the best of the best and to keep what we have here in-house, because we've already trained them and continuing to train them to be the best of the best. Thank you.
Councilmember Montgomery, then Councilmember Bessie.
A few comments and questions and suggestions. One, when we look at the issue that is faced now by the city and our police and our firefighters, it's not one that happened yesterday. When we look at this, history would tell us that maybe 15 years or so ago, police and firefighters were advocating for a similar thing at that time in terms of trying to see what was taking place with pay. What we know we've gone through some cyclical things with economic times that have caused the city to look at austerity measures that cut back on opportunities for pay increase because of the lack of growth. But that has been borne by the people who keep us safe during the day and at night. and we have a responsibility to do something in reference to that. And yes, recently there have been some additional things that have been done, such as the 1.5% piece is done for merit and market, but then that's negligible when we have healthcare costs that go up at the same time, which eat up exactly what was the increase that individuals got from that. Not saying that it's a perfect system, but those were attempts. But at the same time, many people probably didn't see much difference because of the fact of that getting eaten up by those additional costs. But what we can do, and I too, like Councilman McIntosh, have asked in reference to the city manager about additional things of supporting our first responders, police officers, and firefighters, and others in reference to housing opportunities there. So that's one piece. But also, when we look at implementing these options that we have at hand, I would be open from this committee, finance committee, others, of having a real conversation about a policy shift in which we set aside a percentage of our tax growth annually to increases for city employees across the board, not just we were looking at firefighters and our police officers, but this happens because we don't have a structured policy in place that commits a certain percentage of our actual growth to make sure that individuals are paid and that those things happen on an ongoing basis. If we have an instance where we're running into an economic time where we don't see as much expansion in the tax base, we'll have to have some additional conversations. But the commitment to those who do the work, I think we have to make a policy shift in terms of how do we commit increased tax dollars to making sure that we're covering the cost of making sure that we see pay increase on an annual basis. And that's a policy that I think I'm open to debating and the merits of that and whether or not other cities have policies set up and structured that way where that type of commitment of increased tax base is set aside for employees. And I think that's one way of looking at the revenue stream of paying for it as time goes on, instead of us looking now and trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it, how we're going to do this. Well, if we commit those dollars ahead of time, we know at least a percentage of what we're going to be working with at some period of time. And the last comment would be, and this is not something that is specifically aligned with the pay portion, but I do believe that it can potentially affect some of the turnover pieces. And I'd like to see some information, and maybe this is something that comes back to public safety or finance. But I know that there are still some issues from a firefighter standpoint in reference to some of the PTO issues, and that's something that I do want this committee or finance committee to address and to be able to deal with, because I think that, again, all of those factors have implications in terms of how do we keep trained and skilled individuals working for the city of Winston-Salem, and I think we have to do that. So those are my suggestions, and hopefully we can see some of that.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Bessie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure I conceptually understand what's being discussed here, and this is somewhat similar to the question Councilmember Light asked. I think I know the answer to that. Let me make sure I do. What we're talking about here, the option one, the option two, these are remedial plans to address an existing disparity as measured by today's snapshot in time.
Yes.
It's not intended to substitute for what is addressed by a step plan or a career ladder, which is an ongoing compensation for accumulation of seniority and experience, or rising to new levels in terms of responsibility in the department.
Correct.
So we wouldn't be talking about this as an alternative to a step plan or career ladder development, but as something to do to address an existing disparity. We probably need, almost certainly we need to simultaneously begin looking at the questions of whether we need to develop and implement a step plan or career ladder as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
And that was what I intended when I said we would do this for 5 years, and then we would see where we are and decide where we're going to go from there.
And of course, that's not the only alternative. We could make a decision to implement this as a remedial step, and then simultaneously immediately begin studying the question of a step plan or career.
We could.
Thank you.
Councilmember Light.
Thank you. Carmen, one of the things that, this is obviously extremely important because it's our safety net, people who are concerned. But we've got to also address the other city employees. We have some of our categories that are 50% of market rate. And so we've got to factor that into, when you look at, this would cost us a penny on 100 on property taxes, this would cost, we've got to add the other part in too. So I'd be interested in seeing the whole picture if when you have a chance. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions at this time?
I'm just going to make a comment.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
As I listen to what we're saying, and we're talking about what we need to do, and I guess the employees who are here this evening, they are appreciating this opportunity. And the question would come to me, if I were an employee, how quick are you going to get started with what we need to do? And I believe Councilmember Adams touched on a little bit. My question would be, as I stood here, and I want you all to know how much we appreciate you. You are valuable to all of us. You keep us safe and sound. But I would say to the city manager, talk is really easy, but my question would be, where are we going to get the funds, and how quick are we going to implement what we're talking about? And then I agree when I listened to Councilmember Light and Bessie, it should be, this is what we're talking about now, but we have to develop a plan that we can depend on, and we ask employees to, or people to become employed, that they have something that's more concrete to look at.
Mr. Garrity.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Burke, Chairman Taylor. You'll see in those two options, one option is to go ahead and implement in January. We are intending to bring this back as part of a early budget forecast to the Finance Committee in January, as well as the information to this committee. It would be my hope, now it depends on how much we can afford, but it would be my hope that we could implement the 2%, the first 2% this fiscal year, and then going forward, if council makes that commitment, then when we're recruiting that young firefighter, young police officer, we can say to them, every January, you're going to get the council's committed, you're going to get a 2% adjustment, your annual supplement or step, whatever we're going to call it. And then every July, it'll be dependent on merit, but you'll also get a merit raise. So they can know going forward that they've got that potential. Because as I understand, talking to recruiters in both departments, that is what the young person looks at, is, okay, how much am I making now and how much am I going to move up each year? That's critical, and that's what the other cities show them and we compete with. But again, my hope is that we can come back in January, and when we look at the forecast for next year, that we may be able to, with a combination of what we have and some potential, some adjustments in taxes and fees, may be able to move forward sooner than later.
Councilmember Bessie.
Yeah, just a comment for my colleagues' consideration. Since I'm not a member of the Public Safety or the Finance Committees, let me leave this encouragement. I think Mayor Pro Tem Burke is right, talk is cheap, and the folks will believe us if we act now rather than later. I encourage my colleagues to think in terms of adopting immediate, supporting immediate action in January to start. I understand that Councilmember Light's consideration of all city employees is quite valid, and that's an issue that we ought to study. But I would encourage my colleagues not to delay action on this critical component because we recognize that we have other problems that we need to look at. You can get into a situation of paralysis by continuing to broaden the scope of analysis that I don't think we can afford with this particular issue.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Adams will bring us home.
That's right. One more thing as to what Councilmember Montgomery stated, and I think I've mentioned this before again, that sometimes, as we know, depending on the scale of economics, we have increased revenues that come to the city. I would like to think, like I said, like a corporation, that if the corporation shows increased profits, again, some of you might have remember back in the day, they used to do, I forgot what they used to call it, but the employees need to also, it's just a thought, Mr. Garrity, the employees need to benefit and profit from the profits as well, because we wouldn't have made that extra money or revenue if it had not been for all of the employees going to work every day, doing their job. I know people think of that as their merit. That's not the same thing, because that's supposed to come because I'm an employee of the organization. That's part of the statute of what you hired me and how our contract is. But I'm saying at the end of each year, when we can show that maybe we made in excess of $2 or $3 million over what was intended to be made, and what we generally do, I think we put it in the general fund or we do something with it. But why wouldn't we look at a part of that just like we do? Yes, when I worked at the beginning of the year, Christmas, we got a bonus. It was because the corporation, and part of the language in the policy was the corporation has to make X amount of money in revenue. Well, why wouldn't we give some of that back too? And that's one of those initiatives we might need to look at. Like, who wouldn't want an extra $500 or $1,000 at Christmas time in December or in January just because? That's not included with the getting the step there, but that's part of the incentive to keep people here, because part of what corporations do is they add layers of incentives and perks along with the salary. And I think, to my council, that's some of the things that we need to look at. Besides, as Councilmember McIntosh and Montgomery said, housing and other things that we can do to encourage them to stay. Again, come the end of the year, people got Christmas and they got taxes. So if you can help, everybody that work for the city, we made some excess money, let's spread it around, and because it's because of them that we got it. Not because of us, but it's because of them that we were able to see that. Thank you.
Thank
Chair.
you. In conclusion, I can say that there have been some good comments, some good recommendations, and some good suggestions coming from members of the council and members of the committee. In terms of police, fire, and emergency management, the reason why we're here, public safety, I will say that we take you seriously. The operative word here has been action. I feel that we have taken action in the past. We need to do a better job, and we will do a better job of taking action in the future. It appears that we are collectively united with the fact that we want to do better with our police, fire, and our emergency management personnel, and we will do better. So, Ms. Caruth, Mr. City Manager, all of the ideas, recommendations, suggestions, if we would gather those, bring them back to this committee in January, and we will continue to make appropriate progress forward. That's all right with you. Anything further? Thank you. We'll get to you in a moment, Mr. Dwight. Item G2, please.
Item G2, update on Winston-Salem Police Department violent crime.
Giving this report on violent crime is our Police Chief Barry Roundtree. And members of the council, members of the committee, will do this the same way we did before. If there are any questions, we'll just kind of go slide by slide. That way, by the time we get to the end of the conversation, we can ask the questions that need to be asked. Chief Roundtree, you have the floor, and you are recognized.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke, Chairman Taylor, and members of the Public Safety Committee. This information is being provided due to some of your concerns and questions about violent crime in Winston-Salem. This information is also being provided so we can educate the citizens of Winston-Salem on what is actually occurring. Currently, Winston-Salem, like most American cities, have seen an increase in violent crime in 2015. Although our increases are not as significant as some of our neighboring cities and some of the cities across the country, we have seen an increase, and it is concerning. Many cities across the country saw decreases in crime in early 2000 up to about 2012, and then the violent crime gradually started to tick back up around 2013. Currently, the Part 1 violent crime in Winston-Salem is up about 7.4%. The FBI's uniform reporting system categorizes a violent crime as a murder, rape, robbery, and an aggravated assault. Our Part 1 property crime is up about 2%. Property crime is Part 1 property crime is considered a burglary, larceny, or motor vehicle theft. So total Part 1 crime is up about 2.8% in Winston-Salem. That's including Part 1 violent crime and Part 1 property crime. So what's the cause of the increases? I don't have any scientific data. I can tell you what many police chiefs and law enforcement professionals across the country are attributing the increases to, and they do include some human factors and also social factors occurring across the country. Again, violent crime is considered, Part 1 violent crime is murder, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assaults. Some of the human factors attributing the violent crime is the easy access to weapons, handguns, assault-style weapons, high-capacity magazines, and also just society's acceptance and the glory of violent acts. That's what we're seeing. Also, the willingness of individuals to settle disputes with weapons. Don't see many fist fights anymore. Most of the time people get mad and they have a weapon on them, they're going to discharge it. The depreciation of human life. Don't really see where people value human life the way they used to. So it's easy to settle these disputes that they have if they have a firearm. Also, we're seeing a lot of convicted felons possessing weapons and going out committing violent crimes such as robberies and aggravated assaults. Some of the social factors influencing violent crime here in Winston-Salem include poverty, some of the economic resources of some of the individuals who commit these crimes, education, and of course, I have it in red, drug activity and drug abuse. That's driving a lot of the crime also. Lack of community resources, and again, I have this on here twice, the acceptance and the glory of committing some of these violent acts. The inadequate criminal justice system also leads to it, and individuals that have the belief that they can just go out and take other people's property. You know, they don't want to work for it, so they figure that they can just go out and steal whatever they need to do or use a weapon to get the property that they're trying to get.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question about this inadequate criminal justice system?
Yes.
How would you define that, please, sir?
I define it because we're seeing a lot of individuals who really should be incarcerated and are being released back to the cities. And then those same individuals come back out and we see them commit crimes over and over again. And I know it's a cycle. You know, a lot of it deals with economics. Does the state have the resources to keep some of these individuals incarcerated? So there are several things that comes into play when I say inadequate criminal justice system.
Chief Roundtree, Councilman Montgomery.
On the comment on, I think it's the slide prior to this one, that you mentioned this one in terms of social issues influencing violent crime, in particular area of drug activity and abuse. One area, and you may have it later on, but that I don't see here, is mental health challenges and inadequacies in mental health systems. Is that how much of influence is that?
It comes into place some dealing with some of your violent crime, and I don't have domestic violence on here either, and that also comes into play. But the mental health piece is also a big part of it as well.
Please proceed, sir.
Just to let you know some of the things that we're doing to address some of these issues here in Winston-Salem, we do use a focused deterrence approach, where we look at individuals who may have committed similar crimes in the past, you know, if they are suspects. Also, we have implemented a robbery task force. We started looking at the robberies that are occurring across the city. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the press releases. You get the one-call system that we have. So we have implemented a robbery task force to address some of the business robberies and also robberies of persons that we are seeing across the city. We continue to work with our Violent Crimes Task Force. That's a task force that we work with in conjunction with the U.S. Attorney's Office and also in collaboration with our federal law enforcement partners. And we also work with the local district attorney's office as well. We also study national trends, look at things that have been successful around the country. Of course, we still work our Crime Stoppers programs to get information on suspects and any tips that we may have. And also, we try to educate the public through community meetings, public service announcements, press briefings that we have monthly, and also on our media releases, just so they'll be aware of some of the things that are occurring here in Winston-Salem and how they can prevent themselves from being victims of crimes. Also, some of our other initiatives that you see, of course, we have a pretty robust gang unit and criminal intelligence where we track certain things, and we think that is preventing some things from occurring here in our city. Also, with our Special Investigations Division in the schools, we use our schools resource officers for intelligence, and also our street crimes units. Also, what we're doing is, from a forensic standpoint, of course, we have a employee who is able to use ballistic testing. It's a pretty advanced ballistic testing where we can match spent shell casings from different type weapons and tie those to different crimes. Also, we have a major crime response unit, and also we have enhanced fingerprints testing. Just looking at some of the stats for the homicides in 2015, of course, currently right now we sit at 17 homicides. Of course, as you look at the numbers as far as the weapons that are being used, you have 2 from physical strikings with hands and feet and choking. 10 homicides occurs as a result of the use of a handgun. 2 as far as an edged weapon, a blunt instrument, and 1 was a long rifle, which give you 17 homicides up to this point in 2015. I will add that 2 of those homicides were self-defense, where individuals were protecting themselves from an individual who attacked them.
And Chief, if you just talk about the type of homicides that are occurring, what we don't want to do is put out the image that Winston-Salem is the OK Corral and that people are just not safe in this community. Most of the homicides we've seen have been between persons who know each other or something of that sort. So if you just talk a little bit about that.
That's absolutely correct. We haven't seen, I know the captain for our Criminal Investigation Division is here tonight, but from my memory, we haven't seen any where just a person that didn't know the suspect. We haven't seen any homicides that way. There's always some kind of connection, whether it was a dispute that occurred at a party, a nightclub, or domestic violence. There was always some kind of connection to the homicides that we have.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, Chief, I saw on page 2 you listed the types of weapons, the handgun, assault style, and high capacity magazines, and then on page 5 you've listed what the crimes were committed with. You have handguns, and then you have long gun. Is the long gun is not considered an assault weapon, is it? Or
it could have been a shotgun or some other kind of long weapon, not necessarily a assault weapon. But we have seen some of those. We have seized some of those here in our city.
Are we seeing an increase in the assault weapons and magazine type weapons here in crimes or in your department when they have to go out?
We are seeing where individuals are using more high capacity style magazines. We're seeing some cases where they're discharging weapons into vehicles and homes with those type of weapons, and we can tell based on the shell casings that are left at the scene.
Thank you.
Chief?
Also, just to give you an update on the homicides as far as the arrests, we have made eight arrests in the 17 homicides. 2 of the homicides, again, were self-defense. 1 homicide prosecution was declined. That's because there was a mentally challenged person who killed another person. 6 of the homicides, we haven't made arrests, but our detectives are working good leads on those cases. So how many guns are there out here in Winston-Salem? We don't have a real good handle on how many we do have, but we do know that this year we have seized 559 handguns. We have 38 that were found. We seized 84 for safekeeping, and we have 437 that we seized for some type of evidence where they were either used in some type of crime.
And Chief, you can argue the validity of gun buybacks, but I know we've had a couple of those. So maybe the next time you come to the committee, if you can give us the numbers on gun buybacks, how many guns we've gotten off the streets that could have been stolen or misused or utilized, we'd appreciate that as well.
I will. Okay. That's the last slide. If you have any questions, anything that I didn't mention, I'll be glad to answer those questions for you.
Any questions for Chief Roundtree? Councilmember Adams?
I'm full today.
No, it's okay.
Chief, I know you've given us the information for how many homicides and the data for that as to how many were self-defense or how many we've solved. Can you give us or get that information to the committee or the council as to how many homicides, let's say, we had last year, and to date, how many of them were solved? Could we get like a year over year, maybe
Yes.
the past 3 or 5 years, of how many it was, but now how many did we solve and we've not been able to solve still? Okay?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Councilmember McIntosh.
I'd also, to piggyback on that, I'd like to find out from you where we rank in terms of other cities our size and murder rate and crime rates.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can tell you for homicides, we are lower than a lot of cities our size. In particular, one next door to us.
And normally, Chief, when you come in and do this report annually, you do normally
Right.
bring the
I
cities
do.
respective to our size. If you
Yes.
bring that as well,
I
I'm sure the
will.
community will be interested to know. Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Yes, I was going to say, Chief Roundtree, with the relationship of our police with the citizens in this city, through the years, how would you say the relationship with police and citizens?
I think overall we have a good relationship with the citizens that we serve. Of course, with a city of 240,000, at least 240,000 people, everyone may not think that we have a good relationship, but some of the programs that we put forth, some of the efforts that we've made to reach out to our citizens, I do feel that overall we have a good relationship with the citizens that we serve.
Of course, Mayor, continue.
Please, Mayor Pro Tem.
With the young folks in this city, the children, how are you making them aware that the police are their friends, and that what kind of things are you doing to really let them know that we have a pretty good city, and we have probably some less problems than some other cities. And I just want to know, what are you actually doing so they can see a police and go to you rather than leave, looking the other way?
Okay. I would say first off, what we try to do is get out with our young people, whether it's in a community, whether it's at a recreation center, and also some of the programs that we have done, like our youth police academy. We reach out to the young people in our community so we can be with them on a one-on-one setting when there is not some type of confrontation going on. That's a week-long program that we normally do every summer for about a week. We bring them in, we let them play with our toys, so to speak, and we teach them about some of the things that we do and the responsibilities that we have as police officers. Also, we gaining a lot of ground with our SRO program, because we are in the schools, 20 schools, of course, 12 middle schools and 8 high schools. Our officers that work in the schools, they do have a good relationship with the students there. So we think that's also an important piece also. And then just some of the other programs that we do around the city. Of course, we have a few initiatives that are going on for the holiday season or for Christmas with our Stuff the Patrol Car initiative, and also we have a shopping spree that's going to take place at Target on University Parkway this coming Friday morning at 7 a.m. And that way we'll pair a police officer and also a fireman with young people in our community that may not, where their families may not be able to afford toys, and we will let them go shopping with a police officer and a firefighter. Also, that's part of our outreach program as well.
I had one other question to ask. Are your officers, police, able to do their jobs in a comfortable way in this city?
I guess, what's your definition of a comfortable way? I think they're comfortable getting out, performing their duties. Of course, policing right now is not the way it was at one point several years ago. But I think our police officers are professional. They know what to do. They are trained properly, and they are able to go out and do their job.
Well, around the country, some folks are saying police feel limited in what they do and how they can do their jobs. So I was referring to that.
Okay. There's several different thoughts about that. There's one thing that's going across the country now, the Ferguson effect, where the police officers are holding back, doing proactive policing, just based on the scrutiny and some of the things that they've had to face. You know, I think we all saw that in Baltimore after the Freddie Gray incident, where homicide shot up. They had 40 homicides in less than 20 days. So that's one of the things that are going on across the country. I haven't seen that specifically here in Winston-Salem, but that is one of the things that law enforcement professionals and chiefs are looking at and studying now.
I would think that we would work hard so that the police can do their jobs. I don't believe we've ever said for you and your staff not to do the job. We've asked you to be fair across the board, work in a positive way, because we want you to do your job, because we want to be comfortable when we come and go in our city.
And Chief, this last suggestion, and this it will be in conclusion, is nearly not as important as those things that we've discussed, but it is important to some of the members of the community who reached out and mentioned the possibility of a holiday task force. You know, the way we shop now in America is a little bit different. We used to go to the malls and to the stores, but now more people are doing online shopping, and those gifts have to come to front door. On the news, we've seen countless incidents of just people just kind of going up to doors and taking packages off the front porch. So I'd ask maybe we can consider maybe a holiday task force. Everybody's seen bait car. Everybody's seen, I think they've even got bait bike now. But how we want to do it, bait car, is they put out a car, and this car is out, and those people who normally go in and steal cars steal the car, but the car is being controlled by the police. They shut it down and apprehend those people who normally steal cars. So it's a way to get those type of thefts off the street. So, Chief, I'm sure you're quite familiar with the concept. If we look into it, it'll be much appreciated.
Okay.
Any other?
And just for your information, we do have a holiday task force. It started right after Thanksgiving, right at Black Friday. It mainly concentrates in the high shopping areas around Haynes Mall Boulevard. But it is there to ensure that we have a good flow of traffic. Also, we can make sure that all of the shoppers are safe in that area.
Councilmember Bessie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that this report is focused on violent crime, and rightly so, but you've also appended a copy of the latest citywide crime review,
Yes,
which is our
I did.
year-to-year for Part 1 crimes generally. And while we clearly want to continue to address the question of murders, we've had 17 so far this year as compared to 15 last year, and we want to continue to address the serious issues of robberies. We had 433 this year compared to 411 citywide to this point last year. We also need to look at the areas that Part 1 crime, property crimes. I know that last year we particularly asked, many of us particularly asked the department to look hard at burglaries, house breakings, and I think there's a very positive number to report, to note in this report that burglaries are down year to year 3.4%. There have been 3506 to date this year as compared to 3631 to date last year. The department is being responsive and effective. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, your good work in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Bessie. Chief Roundtree, we appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, before we adjourn, I like to be a man of my word. There's no way that we can allow everyone to speak given the time that we have this evening, so we'll have to go with who we have down on the sheet. And down on the sheet we have our committee regular, Mr. Dan Dwight. I know you asked me to recognize, and if the committee is okay, if we just give him 3 minutes or so to speak as he normally does, and then we'll move to adjourn. Mr. Dwight, if you'll give your name and address for the record, please.
looking for the sheet, so somebody must have filled it in. I'm Dan Dwight, 500 Martha Court, Kernersville, 27284. I'd made some notes before the meeting on G1, and I'm happy with much of what was said and what's needed. I just want to reiterate a couple topics that this is an urgent matter, the salaries. It's not something that can wait 2 or 3 years to catch up. It's not a time to point fingers. We do want to know what happened, how it lapsed, but now's the time to join hands and come up with a solution. I couldn't find last year's budget numbers, but in the past years, the police budget's been around $61 million, and they've spent about $60 million. So there's been about a $1 million surplus each year. So if you take 500 officers and give them all $2,000, that takes up the surplus money. I just, we're asking where's the money going to come from. That's one thing I see, and we got the best training in Winston-Salem. We know that. We know that's the reason we lose officers, because they come here for the training, and losing experienced officers is a liability to the city. So it's something we need to correct quickly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dwight. Members of the committee, we all agree that this is an issue. I think we've got some collective solutions, and together we'll move forward with helping to address this issue. If there's nothing further for the good of the order, we'll hereby consider this committee meeting to be adjourned.